I've been living with this secret for 8 months now, carrying it around like a weight in my chest that gets heavier every time Jake walks into the room. 8 months of watching him bring home different women. 8 months of listening to him talk about his dates while I nod and smile and pretend my heart isn't breaking a little more each time. 8 months of being the perfect roommate, the supportive friend, the guy who always has his back, all while desperately wishing I could be something more. Jake doesn't know, of course. How could he? He's never given me any reason to think he'd be anything other than completely straight, completely unavailable, completely out of reach. He talks about women the way other guys talk about sports, with genuine enthusiasm and appreciation. He's had 3 girlfriends since we moved in together after college, and I've watched him navigate each relationship with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never questioning who you're supposed to want. Comment where you're listening from. I'd love to know how many of you understand what it's like to love someone who doesn't even know you could love them that way. The worst part isn't even the unrequited feelings. It's the way Jake treats me like I'm his best friend in the world, because I am, and he's mine, and that makes everything so much more complicated. He trusts me completely. He tells me things he doesn't tell anyone else. He falls asleep on the couch during our movie nights, and I get to watch him breathe, watch the way his hair falls across his forehead, and I have to remind myself not to reach out and touch him because that would ruin everything. I've gotten good at hiding it. Really good. I've perfected the art of the casual glance, the friendly smile, the supportive comment about whatever girl he's seeing. I've learned to excuse myself when he brings someone home, to put on headphones and turn up the music so I don't have to hear them together. I've mastered the skill of being happy for him while dying a little inside. But hiding something this big takes its toll. I've been feeling restless lately, like I need to do something to move forward instead of just existing in this liminal space between friendship and heartbreak. That's why I said yes when Hunter asked me out. Hunter's in my advanced digital illustration class, and he's been flirting with me for weeks. He's cute, dark hair, bright smile, the kind of artistic intensity that makes him attractive in a brooding, creative way. More importantly, he's actually interested in me, which feels like a miracle after months of pining for someone who sees me as nothing more than a friend. I didn't plan to tell Jake about the date. I was going to keep it casual, maybe mention I was going out but not specify with whom. But Jake has this way of asking questions that makes you want to tell him everything, and before I knew it, I was explaining about Hunter and our coffee date planned for Saturday afternoon. The change in Jake's expression was immediate and unmistakable. His face went from relaxed interest to something I'd never seen before, something sharp and almost angry. His jaw tightened, and for a second, he looked like he wanted to say something harsh. The transformation was so sudden and so unlike him that I stopped mid-sentence, confused by the intensity of his reaction. "Hunter," he said, and there was something in his voice that made my stomach flip. "The guy from your art class?" I nodded, studying his face, trying to understand what was happening. This wasn't normal Jake behavior. Normal Jake would have asked about Hunter's interests, maybe made a joke about artists, definitely would have been supportive and encouraging. This Jake looked like he wanted to punch something. "When?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled in a way that suggested he was working hard to keep it that way. "Saturday," I said slowly. "Just coffee at that place near campus. Nothing major." "Right." Jake stood up abruptly from the couch, running a hand through his hair. "Nothing major." The silence stretched between us, filled with tension I couldn't name. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, why he was acting like I'd just told him I was moving to another country instead of going on a simple coffee date. But before I could find the words, Jake seemed to shake himself out of whatever mood had grabbed him. "Sorry," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm being weird. You know how I get about people I care about. Protective big brother mode or whatever. But it didn't feel like protective big brother mode. It felt like something else entirely, something that made my heart race and my hands shake and my carefully constructed walls of assumption start to crack just a little. "You don't even know Hunter," I pointed out, trying to keep my voice light. "Exactly." Jake sat back down, but his body language was still tense, still wrong. "I don't know him. I don't know if he's good enough for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Good enough for me. Like Jake had opinions about who I should be with, like he'd given it thought, like it mattered to him in a way that went beyond casual friendship concern. "It's just coffee," I said again, but my voice came out smaller than I intended. "Right," Jake repeated, But he was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Just coffee. The conversation moved on after that, shifting to safer topics like work and weekend plans and whether we needed to buy milk. But something had changed in the air between us. Some invisible line had been crossed, and I couldn't stop thinking about the look on Jake's face when I'd mentioned Hunter's name. Later that night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I replayed the moment over and over. The flash of something that looked almost like jealousy. The way he'd said Hunter's name like it tasted bad. The careful control in his voice when he'd asked about the date. I told myself I was imagining things. Jake was straight. He'd never shown any interest in men, never even seemed curious about that side of life. He was probably just being overprotective the way straight guys sometimes got about their friends' dating lives. Maybe he was worried about me getting hurt, or maybe he was just having a weird day. But deep down, in the part of me that had been watching him and wanting him for 8 months, something had shifted. Some small, dangerous hope had taken root, and I couldn't seem to kill it no matter how many logical reasons I gave myself for why Jake's reaction meant nothing. Because what if it did mean something? What if, after all this time of hiding and hoping and hurting, Jake's jealousy meant that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone in this as I thought? Blake stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror the next morning, trying to convince himself that he'd imagined the whole thing. The way Jake's jaw had tightened when he mentioned Hunter's name. The flash of something raw and possessive in his eyes before he'd covered it with that awkward joke about being protective. But no matter how many times Blake replayed the moment, he couldn't shake the memory of how Jake's voice had gone rough around the edges, how his entire body had gone rigid like he was fighting some internal battle. It was dangerous territory, this hope that had taken root in his chest. Blake had spent 8 months carefully cultivating his acceptance of the situation, building walls around his heart to protect himself from the inevitable disappointment of wanting something he could never have. Jake was straight. Jake dated women. Jake had never shown even the slightest interest in men, let alone in his quietly pining roommate who watched him from across their shared living space like some lovesick fool. But that moment last night had felt different. Real. Like maybe Blake wasn't as invisible as he'd always assumed. He splashed cold water on his face and tried to push the thoughts away. Jake was probably already at work, thankfully, which meant Blake could avoid the awkwardness of facing him over morning coffee. The last thing he needed was to analyze every casual interaction, searching for signs that weren't there. Except when Blake emerged from the bathroom, Jake was very much not at work. He was sitting at their small kitchen table, still in his pajama pants and a rumpled t-shirt, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at his phone with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for major life decisions. "Don't you have that presentation today?" Blake asked, trying to keep his voice casual as he moved toward the coffee maker. Jake's head snapped up, and Blake caught another glimpse of that strange tension from the night before. "Moved it to tomorrow. Had some things to think about." His eyes followed Blake's movements with an attention that felt almost weighted. "So this Hunter guy, what's he like?" Blake's hand stilled on the coffee mug. "I told you, he's just someone from my art class." "That's not what I asked." Jake's voice carried an edge that Blake had never heard before, at least not directed at him. "I mean, what's he actually like? Is he one of those pretentious artist types who thinks he's changing the world with his abstract expressionism?" The specificity of the insult surprised a laugh out of Blake. "Since when do you know anything about abstract expressionism?" "I know things." Jake's defensive tone was almost endearing. "I'm not completely uncultured." Blake settled into the chair across from him, studying Jake's face. There were shadows under his eyes like he hadn't slept well, and his hair was sticking up in directions that suggested he'd been running his hands through it. "You seem really invested in my coffee date for someone who was making jokes about it last night." Something flickered across Jake's expression, caught, maybe, or embarrassed. "I'm not invested. I just think you should be careful. You don't know this guy. I don't know most people before I meet them. That's generally how meeting people works." "That's not what I mean." Jake's fingers tightened around his mug. You're trusting, Blake. You see the best in people. I just don't want some asshole taking advantage of that." There was something almost desperate in Jake's voice, like he was trying to convince himself as much as Blake. It made Blake's chest tight with a mixture of hope and confusion. When have I ever been taken advantage of? There was that guy from the bookstore last month. Blake blinked. "David? We went to one movie. He was perfectly nice. He spent the entire time on his phone." "How would you know that?" Jake's face went slightly red. You told me. No, I didn't. Blake was certain of that. He barely mentioned David at all, partly because there hadn't been much to say and partly because talking about his dates with Jake felt like picking at a wound. I said the movie was good and that David wasn't really my type. Well, you implied it. Jake's voice was getting defensive again. And there was that other guy. The one from the gym. Marcus. Blake tried to remember mentioning Marcus to Jake. They'd gone out twice, pleasant enough evenings that had fizzled out naturally when neither of them felt a spark. What about him? He was too intense. Always texting you. Blake was starting to feel like he was missing something important. Jake, are you keeping track of everyone I go out with? The question hung in the air between them. Jake's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, guilt, something that might have been panic. I'm not keeping track. I pay attention. We're friends. I care about what happens to you. Right. Blake took a sip of his coffee, using the moment to study Jake's face. Friends. Of course friends. What else would we be? There was something almost frantic in the way Jake asked the question, like he was begging Blake to provide a safe answer. It made Blake's heart race and break at the same time. I don't know, Jake. What else could we be? Jake stared at him for a long moment, and Blake could practically see the war happening behind his eyes. Then Jake's phone buzzed against the table, breaking the spell. He grabbed it like a lifeline, his face immediately shifting into relief. That's work. I should probably get ready. He stood up quickly, already backing toward the hallway. Have fun with your coffee date. Just be careful, okay? Jake. Blake's voice stopped him at the doorway. Are you okay? For a second, Jake looked like he might actually answer honestly. His shoulders sagged, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. Then he straightened up, flashing that easy smile that Blake had seen him use on difficult clients and pushy sales managers. I'm fine. Just tired. Long week. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Blake alone with his coffee and a head full of questions. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work and distraction. Blake found himself checking his phone constantly, though he couldn't say what he was hoping to find. A text from Jake, maybe, explaining his weird behavior. Or not explaining it. Blake wasn't sure which would be worse. By the time he was getting ready to meet Hunter, Blake had almost convinced himself that he was reading too much into everything. Jake was protective of their friendship, that was all. Maybe he was going through something at work, or with one of his girlfriends, and Blake was just convenient to worry about. But as Blake was grabbing his keys from the bowl by the door, Jake emerged from his room fully dressed, jacket in hand. Where are you going? Blake asked. Out with some friends from work. Jake's answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Probably going to grab drinks after dinner. Which friends? Jake's pause was barely perceptible. Tom and the guys from the office. You don't know them. Blake nodded, but something about Jake's tone felt off. In all the months they'd lived together, Jake had never been vague about his plans. If anything, he was usually overly detailed, complaining about boring work friends or bragging about his latest conquest. Well, have fun. Blake opened the door, then paused. Jake. Yeah. Thanks. For worrying about me. I mean, it's nice to have someone who cares. Jake's face did something complicated. Of course I care, Blake. He stopped, shook his head. Just text me when you get home safe, okay? Blake nodded and headed out, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Jake had been about to say something else entirely. The coffee shop was busy for a Wednesday evening, filled with the usual mix of students and professionals winding down from their day. Blake spotted Hunter immediately, tall, lean, with the kind of carefully tousled hair that probably took 20 minutes to achieve. He was sitting at a corner table, sketching in a notebook, and he looked up with a genuine smile when Blake approached. Blake, I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. Why wouldn't I? Blake settled into the chair across from him, trying to push thoughts of Jake out of his head. I don't know. You always seem kind of mysterious in class. Like you're thinking about something else. Blake nearly choked on his first sip of coffee. If only Hunter knew what he was usually thinking about during their figure drawing sessions. I'm just focused on the work. Right. Hunter's smile turned slightly teasing. Is that what you call those incredibly detailed sketches you do when you think no one's looking? They talked easily for the next hour, covering everything from art to movies to their shared frustration with Professor Martinez's tendency to critique their work in front of the entire class. Hunter was funny and smart, with strong opinions about everything from coffee to contemporary sculpture. Under normal circumstances, Blake would have been interested. Hunter was exactly the kind of guy he usually went for: creative, passionate, available. But Blake's mind kept drifting. He found himself wondering what Jake was doing, whether he was actually out with coworkers or if he was sitting at home, staring at his phone like he had been that morning. Every time Blake's phone buzzed, he felt a spike of anticipation that had nothing to do with the attractive man sitting across from him. So, Hunter said, leaning forward with a grin, "I have to ask, are you seeing anyone?" Blake's attention snapped back to the conversation. No, I'm not seeing anyone." "Good." Hunter's smile widened. "Because I've been wanting to ask you out for weeks, but you always seem so, I don't know, distracted? Like your mind is somewhere else." Blake felt a flush of guilt. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to be distracted." "It's okay. I just wondered if there was someone else. Someone you're hung up on, maybe?" The question hit closer to home than Blake was prepared for. "It's complicated. Isn't it always?" Hunter reached across the table, his fingers brushing against Blake's hand. "Want to talk about it?" Blake looked down at their hands, Hunter's fingers warm against his skin. It should have felt nice. It should have sent that little thrill through him that came with new attraction, new possibility. Instead, all he could think about was Jake's face that morning, the way his eyes had gone dark and stormy when Blake mentioned Hunter's name. "There's this guy," Blake heard himself saying. "Someone I have feelings for." "And he doesn't feel the same way?" Blake almost laughed. "He's straight. Or I thought he was. I don't know anymore." Hunter's expression softened. "Ah, the eternal gay dilemma. Fall for the straight boy, spend months analyzing every interaction for signs of reciprocal interest." "Something like that. Been there." Hunter squeezed Blake's hand gently. "Want some advice from someone who's been spectacularly wrong about these things before?" Blake nodded. "If he's giving you mixed signals, he's probably confused, not straight. Truly straight guys don't usually send mixed signals to their gay friends. They're either completely oblivious or they're dealing with some stuff of their own." Blake felt his heart skip. "You think?" "I think you should probably figure out what's going on with him before you start dating other people. For your sake and for the sake of guys like me who are going to get their hopes up." Blake looked up at Hunter, surprised by his understanding. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to waste your time." "You didn't waste my time. This was fun." "But Blake," Hunter smiled, "life's too short to spend it wondering what if. If this guy matters to you, maybe it's worth finding out where you stand." They parted ways outside the coffee shop with a friendly hug and mutual understanding that this was probably their first and last date. Blake walked home through the cooling evening air, Hunter's words echoing in his head. "If he's giving you mixed signals, he's probably confused, not straight." Blake's phone buzzed as he climbed the stairs to his apartment. A text from Jake. "How was coffee?" "Home safe." Blake stared at the message, his heart pounding. It was nearly 10 p.m. Jake had never asked him to check in after a date before. He typed back, "Just got home. Coffee was good." The response came almost immediately. "Good. Glad you had fun." Blake hesitated, then typed, "Are you home?" "Yeah. Been home for a while. Work thing ended early." Blake paused outside his apartment door, key in hand. He could hear the TV on inside, could picture Jake sprawled on their couch in his usual spot. For a moment, he considered staying in the hallway, avoiding whatever awkward energy had been building between them. But Hunter's words came back to him. Life's too short to spend it wondering what if. Blake took a deep breath and opened the door. Jake looked up from the couch as Blake entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Hey, how was Hunter?" "He was nice." Blake hung up his jacket, acutely aware of Jake's attention on him. "Smart. Funny. Great." Jake's voice was flat. "So you'll see him again?" Blake turned to face him, studying Jake's expression. "I don't think so." Something flickered across Jake's face. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. Why not? If he was so great. Blake moved closer, settling into the armchair across from the couch. "Because I spent the entire date thinking about someone else." Jake's breath caught, barely audible. "Oh, Jake." Blake's voice was gentler now. "What's going on with you?" "Really?" For a long moment, Jake didn't answer. He stared at the TV screen, though Blake could tell he wasn't actually watching whatever show was playing. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists on his thighs. "I don't know," Jake said finally. I honestly don't know. Blake has discovered that Jake's protectiveness runs deeper than friendship, especially when Jake starts asking probing questions about Blake's dating life and showing up with mysterious plans whenever Blake has dates. During coffee with Hunter, Blake realizes he's been distracted by thoughts of Jake, and Hunter wisely suggests that mixed signals from supposedly straight guys usually mean confusion rather than true heterosexuality. When Blake comes home and Jake immediately asks about the date with obvious investment in the answer, Blake decides to be honest about spending the evening thinking of someone else, leading Jake to admit his own confusion about his intense feelings. The admission hung between us like a live wire, crackling with possibility and danger. Jake's face had gone pale, his usual easy confidence replaced by something raw and uncertain. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance that felt both impossibly small and insurmountably vast, but I couldn't move. The weight of his confession, that he didn't know, that he was honestly confused, pressed against my chest like a physical thing. "Blake," he started, then stopped, running his hands through his hair in that way he did when he was stressed about work or his family. Except this time, the stress was about me. About us. About feelings he couldn't name or didn't want to acknowledge. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly, even though every fiber of my being wanted him to. I wanted him to unpack the confusion, to tell me what it meant when he showed up at my dates, when he sat too close on the couch, when he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. "But I do," he said, and something in his voice made me look up. His eyes were darker than usual, conflicted. "I've been thinking about this for weeks, Blake. About why I can't stand the thought of you with someone else. About why I keep making excuses to spend time with you. About why he cut himself off, shaking his head. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. I could hear the neighbor's TV through the thin walls, the distant hum of traffic, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Everything felt suspended, like we were balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. "I should go to bed," I said finally, though the last thing I wanted was to leave this moment unfinished. But I could see the panic starting to creep into Jake's expression, the way his jaw tightened when he was about to retreat behind his usual jokes and deflection. "Yeah," he agreed, but neither of us moved. We stayed there, facing each other across the living room, caught in the gravity of what had almost been said. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every pause, every flicker of emotion across Jake's face. The way he'd said he didn't know, it wasn't dismissive. It was scared, confused, like he was standing at the edge of a cliff and couldn't decide whether to jump or step back. I thought about Hunter's words from earlier that day, about mixed signals from supposedly straight guys. Was that what this was? Jake questioning everything he thought he knew about himself because of feelings he couldn't explain? The possibility made my chest tight with hope and terror in equal measure. The next morning, Jake was gone before I woke up. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter about an early client meeting, but I could read between the lines. He needed space to process, to figure out what he was feeling without me there watching his every expression. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him, but the messages were just clients and spam. By lunch, I was checking my phone obsessively, wondering if he was avoiding me entirely or just genuinely busy. When Jake finally came home that evening, he was different, more careful. He kept physical distance between us, sitting on the opposite end of the couch instead of his usual spot right next to me. He answered my questions about his day in clipped sentences, his eyes focused on the TV instead of meeting mine. "Everything okay?" I asked during a commercial break, though I already knew the answer. "Fine," he said, but his voice was tight. "Just tired." I wanted to push, to demand we talk about what had happened the night before, but I could see how hard he was working to keep himself together. So I let it go, even though the careful distance between us felt like a physical ache. The pattern continued for the next few days. Jake would leave early and come home late, always with a reasonable excuse. When we were both in the apartment, he was polite but distant, like he was trying to figure out how to be around me without crossing whatever line he'd drawn in his mind. It was torture. I found myself analyzing every interaction, looking for signs of what he was thinking. When he handed me my coffee in the morning, did his fingers linger against mine? Or was I imagining it? When he laughed at something I said, was there warmth in his eyes, or just politeness? By Thursday, I was going crazy. I called Hunter, needing to talk to someone who understood what it was like to navigate feelings for someone who might not be ready to acknowledge their own. He's spiraling, Hunter said after I'd explained the situation. Classic gay panic. The poor guy probably grew up thinking he was completely straight, and now he's having feelings that don't fit into his worldview. But what am I supposed to do? I asked, pacing around my office during my lunch break. I can't force him to figure it out. No, but you can't let him pretend it didn't happen either, Hunter said. That's not fair to either of you. You deserve better than being ignored because he's scared. Hunter was right, but knowing what I should do and actually doing it were two different things. The thought of confronting Jake, of pushing him when he was already struggling, made me feel sick. What if I pushed too hard and he decided our friendship wasn't worth the complication? That night, I made dinner for both of us, hoping the familiar routine might ease some of the tension. Jake came home around 7, looking exhausted and stressed. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Rough day? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Something like that, he said, but he didn't elaborate. He sat down at the kitchen table, accepting the plate I offered with a quiet thanks. We ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant buzz of the refrigerator. I kept stealing glances at him, noting the way his shoulders were tense, the way he kept pushing food around his plate instead of eating. Jake, I said finally, unable to stand the careful distance anymore. We need to talk about what happened the other night. He looked up sharply, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Blake. Please, I said, cutting him off. We can't just pretend it didn't happen. You said you were confused, and then you've been avoiding me for 4 days. That's not fair. He set down his fork, his hands clenching into fists on the table. I'm not avoiding you. Yes, you are, I said gently. You're up and gone before I wake up, you come home late, and when you are here, you act like I'm a stranger. We went from being best friends to you barely looking at me. I'm trying to figure things out, he said, his voice strained. I need time to think. About what? I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew the answer. He was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. About why I can't stop thinking about you. About why the thought of you with someone else makes me want to punch something. About why I've been lying awake at night wondering what it would be like to. He stopped abruptly, shaking his head. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. What it would be like to what? He looked up at me then, and the vulnerability in his eyes took my breath away. To kiss you, he said quietly. To hold you. To be the person you think about when you're falling asleep. The words hung between us like a confession, raw and honest and terrifying. I could see the fear in his expression, the way he was bracing for rejection or judgment or some kind of catastrophic reaction. Jake, I said softly, and he flinched like he expected me to tell him he was wrong or confused or going through a phase. I know it's crazy, he said quickly. I know I'm probably messing everything up. I've never felt this way about a guy before, and I don't know what it means or what I'm supposed to do with it. I keep thinking maybe it's just because we're close friends, or because I'm between relationships, or because. Stop, I said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with mine. He went very still, his eyes fixed on where our skin touched. Stop trying to explain it away. But I don't understand it, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I've always been straight, Blake. I've had girlfriends since high school. I've never looked at a guy and thought, he swallowed hard. I've never wanted anyone the way I want you. The admission sent a shock through my entire system. I'd hoped, dreamed, imagined, but hearing him say it out loud was overwhelming. The careful walls I built around my feelings came crashing down, leaving me exposed and trembling. You don't have to understand it, I said, my voice shaking. You don't have to have it all figured out. Feelings don't always make sense. But what if I'm wrong, he asked, and the fear in his voice was palpable. What if I'm just confused and I end up hurting you? What if I ruin everything between us? I wanted to tell him that he could never ruin anything, that I'd rather have him confused and present than certain and distant. But I could see how much courage it had taken for him to admit his feelings, how terrified he was of the implications. Then we'll figure it out together, I said instead. But you can't keep running away from this. From me. It's not fair to either of us. He turned his hand over under mine, our palms pressing together. His skin was warm, slightly rough from his gym workouts, familiar and foreign at the same time. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. I know, I said. I'm scared too. Of what? He asked, looking surprised. Of hoping for something that might not be real, I said honestly. Of losing my best friend because I want more than you can give. Of falling even deeper in love with you and having to watch you realize this was all a mistake. His eyes widened at my words, and I realized I'd said more than I intended. The word love hung between us, heavy with meaning and possibility and danger. Blake, he said, his voice rough. How long have you? Months, I said, cutting him off. Since before you started dating Sarah. Maybe longer. I've been trying to get over it, trying to move on, but every time you smile at me or fall asleep on my shoulder during movie night, I fall a little deeper. He was quiet for a long moment, processing what I told him. I could see the conflict in his expression, the way he was trying to reconcile his feelings with everything he thought he knew about himself. I think I knew, he said finally. Part of me, anyway. The way you looked at me sometimes, the way you'd get quiet when I talked about my dates. I told myself I was imagining it, but I think I knew. And it didn't bother you? I asked, surprised. It should have, he said, his thumb tracing across my knuckles. If someone had told me 6 months ago that my male roommate was in love with me, I would have been uncomfortable. But with you, it felt, I don't know, natural. Like it made sense. The simple honesty of his words sent warmth spreading through my chest. He wasn't running away or making excuses or trying to pretend his feelings didn't exist. He was here, holding my hand, admitting that this thing between us felt right despite all the reasons it shouldn't. So what do we do now? I asked, afraid to hope but unable to stop myself. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying our joined hands. I don't know, he said finally. I've never done this before. I don't know how to be with a guy, or what people will think, or how to tell my family. I don't even know if I'm actually gay or if it's just you. It doesn't have to be a label, I said gently. It can just be us. We can figure out the rest later. He looked up at me, and something in his expression shifted. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that looked like hope. I want to try, he said quietly. I want to figure this out with you. I just need you to be patient with me while I learn how to do this. I can be patient, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. I've been patient for months. I can wait a little longer. He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him in days. Thank you, he said, for being honest with me, for not giving up on me when I was being an idiot. You weren't being an idiot, I said. You were being human. This is scary stuff. Yeah, he agreed. But maybe the scary stuff is worth it if it means I get to keep you. The words sent a rush of warmth through me, and I found myself smiling back. We were still holding hands across the table, still surrounded by the careful distance of the past few days, but something had shifted. The wall Jake had built between us was cracking, letting in light and possibility. So, I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the magnitude of what we just shared. What happens now? Now, he said, standing up but not letting go of my hand. We clean up dinner and watch a movie. And maybe you sit next to me on the couch instead of on the opposite end like we're strangers. I can do that, I said, letting him pull me to my feet. As we cleared the table together, our movements synchronized from months of shared domestic routines, I felt something settle in my chest. We weren't rushing into anything, weren't making promises we couldn't keep. We were just two people who cared about each other, willing to explore what that meant. When we settled onto the couch later, Jake's arm around my shoulders and my head resting against his chest, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. His heart was beating fast under my ear, and I could feel the tension in his body, but he didn't pull away. This is nice, he said quietly, his fingers playing with my hair. Yeah, I agreed, closing my eyes and letting myself sink into the warmth of his embrace. It is. We stayed like that through the entire movie, neither of us really watching, both of us focused on the way this new intimacy felt. It was tentative and careful, but it was real. After months of hiding my feelings and days of careful distance, having Jake hold me felt like coming home. When the credits rolled, neither of us moved. Jake's breathing had evened out, and for a moment I thought he'd fallen asleep, but then his hand tightened slightly on my shoulder. Blake, he said softly. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't give up on me. I smiled against his chest, feeling more hopeful than I had in months. Me too. I wake up the next morning with Jake's arms still wrapped around me, his face buried against my shoulder. The early sunlight filters through our living room curtains, casting everything in a soft golden glow that makes last night feel almost dreamlike. For a moment, I'm afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell has settled over us. Jake's breathing is deep and even, and I can feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my back. But reality starts creeping in as I fully wake up. We're both still in yesterday's clothes, tangled together on our couch, and I have no idea what this means for us going forward. Jake had been so vulnerable last night, so raw when he admitted his confusion about his feelings. I don't want to push him or make him feel trapped by what happened between us. I shift slightly, trying to ease the crick in my neck, and Jake stirs behind me. His arm tightens around my waist for a moment before he seems to realize where we are. I feel him tense, his body going rigid against mine, and my heart sinks a little. "Morning," I say softly, not turning around yet. I want to give him space to process without feeling like I'm watching his every reaction. "Hey." Jake's voice is rough with sleep, and I feel him slowly pull his arm away from me. I need to get ready for work." I sit up, finally turning to look at him. His hair is messy from sleep, and there's a pillow crease on his cheek, but his eyes are guarded in a way that makes my chest tight. "Jake, about last night." "I know what you're going to say," he interrupts, running a hand through his hair. "And you're right. I'm probably just confused about everything. It's been a weird few weeks." The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not what I was going to say. He looks at me then, really looks at me, and I can see the fear in his eyes. "Then what?" "I was going to say that I don't want you to feel like you have to figure everything out right now. What happened between us was real, Jake. At least it was for me. But I don't want you to panic about it." Something in his expression softens, but he still looks uncertain. "I've never felt like this before, Blake. About anyone. Not even with Isabella or any of the others. It's terrifying." "I know," I say, resisting the urge to reach for him. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't have to have all the answers right away." He nods, but I can see him already starting to retreat into himself. "I really do need to get ready for work. We have that big presentation today. I want to say more, want to make sure he knows that I'm here for him no matter what, but I can see that he needs space to think." "Okay. We'll talk more later." "Yeah," he says, but something in his tone makes me doubt it. Later. The next few days pass in a strange sort of limbo. Jake isn't avoiding me exactly, but he's definitely keeping his distance. He leaves for work earlier than usual and comes home later, always with some excuse about drinks with colleagues or errands he needs to run. When we are in the apartment together, he's polite but careful, like he's afraid of getting too close. I try to give him the space he seems to need, but it's killing me. Every careful smile, every way he makes sure not to sit too close to me on the couch, every time he cuts a conversation short feels like a small rejection. I keep replaying that night over and over, wondering if I misread everything, if what felt like a breakthrough was actually just Jake having a moment of confusion that he now regrets. By Thursday, I'm exhausted from walking on eggshells in my own home. I'm sitting at my computer, trying to focus on a logo design for a local bakery, when my phone buzzes with a text from Leo. "Hey, want to grab dinner Saturday? I've been thinking about you since we met at that coffee shop." I stare at the message for a long moment. Leo is sweet, uncomplicated, and genuinely interested in me. He's exactly the kind of guy I should be dating instead of pining after my emotionally unavailable roommate. But the thought of going out with him feels wrong somehow, like I'd be betraying something fragile and precious, even if Jake doesn't want it. I'm still staring at my phone when I hear Jake's key in the lock. He comes in looking tired, his tie loosened and his shirt wrinkled from a long day at the office. He glances at me and nods hello, but starts heading toward his room without really stopping to talk. "Jake," I call out, and he pauses. "How was your day?" "Long," he says, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'm just going to grab a shower and probably order some takeout." "I could cook," I offer, hating how tentative my own voice sounds. We haven't had a real meal together in days. He hesitates, and for a moment I think he's going to accept. But then he shakes his head. "Thanks, but I'm pretty beat." Rain check. Another rain check. Another polite deflection. I watch him disappear into his room and feel something crack inside my chest. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Jake got scared by what happened between us, and now he's pulling away, leaving me feeling more alone than I did before he knew about my feelings. I look down at my phone again, at Leo's message waiting for a response. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for Jake to figure out what he wants. Maybe it's time to start moving forward with my own life, even if it means accepting that what happened between us was just a moment of confusion for him. I start typing back to Leo, agreeing to dinner, but I can't bring myself to hit send. Instead, I set my phone aside and try to focus on my work, but the logo I'm designing keeps coming out wrong, the colors all muddled and the lines lacking any real coherence. Friday night, Jake comes home around 8 with a grocery bag and what looks like a genuine smile. I thought I'd make that pasta thing you like, he says, holding up a box of penne, the one with the sun-dried tomatoes and spinach. It's such a normal, domestic gesture that it catches me completely off guard. Oh, okay. That sounds good. He bustles around the kitchen, humming under his breath, and for a moment it feels like nothing has changed between us. But I can see the careful way he moves, making sure not to brush against me when he passes, the way he keeps the conversation light and surface level. So I was thinking, he says as he stirs the pasta sauce, maybe we should have people over soon, like a party or something. It's been a while since we've done anything social here. The suggestion hits me wrong, though I can't quite articulate why. People. Yeah, you know. Some of my coworkers, maybe some of your friends. That guy Leo you mentioned, maybe Hunter from your art class. He's not looking at me as he says this, focused intently on the stove. It could be fun. I stare at his back, trying to parse what he's really saying. You want me to invite Leo and Hunter to a party here? Sure, why not? I mean, you've been dating, right? I thought maybe it would be good to get to know them better. As your friend, as your friend. The words land like a physical blow. Jake, what are you doing? He finally turns around, and his expression is carefully neutral. What do you mean? You're pushing me toward other guys. After everything that happened between us, you're literally trying to set me up with other people. I'm not, he stops, his jaw working like he's trying to find the right words. I'm trying to be supportive. Of your dating life? My dating life. I repeat the words flatly. Is that what you want? For me to be dating other people? Something flickers across his face, too quick for me to read. I want you to be happy, Blake. That's not what I asked. He turns back to the stove, but I can see the tension in his shoulders. I think the pasta's ready. Jake. Let's just eat, okay? I'm starving. We eat in relative silence, the weight of unspoken words heavy between us. Jake makes small talk about work, about the weather, about anything except what's really happening between us. I play along, but every casual comment feels like another brick in the wall he's building between us. After dinner, I retreat to my room and finally respond to Leo's text, agreeing to meet him Saturday night. If Jake wants me to date other people, if he's going to pretend that what happened between us was nothing, then maybe I should stop fighting it. Saturday evening, I'm getting ready for my date with Leo when Jake appears in my doorway. He's wearing jeans and a gray sweater that brings out his eyes, and his hair is damp like he just got out of the shower. You look nice, he says, and there's something in his voice that I can't identify. Hot date. Just dinner, I say, trying to keep my tone light. Leo wanted to try that new Italian place downtown. Leo. Jake repeats the name like he's testing how it sounds. He seems like a good guy. He is. I adjust my collar in the mirror, hyper-aware of Jake watching me. He's easy to talk to. Uncomplicated. Uncomplicated is good, Jake says, but his voice sounds strained. That's what you should have. I turn to face him fully. Is it? We stare at each other for a long moment, and I can see something warring in his expression. But then he steps back, putting distance between us again. Have fun tonight, he says. I'll probably be up when you get back if you want to tell me how it went. The date with Leo is perfectly pleasant. He's charming and funny, and he listens when I talk about my work. He tells me about his job at the nonprofit where he works, about his family, about his hobbies. He's exactly the kind of guy I should be falling for, but all I can think about is Jake. When Leo walks me to the door of my building, he leans in for a kiss. It's sweet and soft, and he tastes like the wine we had with dinner. But when he pulls back, I feel nothing except guilt. I'd like to see you again, he says, his hand still resting on my waist. Maybe next weekend? I'd like that, I hear myself say, even though I'm not sure it's true. He smiles and kisses my cheek before heading back to his car. I watch him drive away, then take a deep breath before heading upstairs. The apartment is quiet when I let myself in, but I can see light coming from under Jake's door. I think about going straight to my room, but something makes me stop at his door instead. I can hear music playing softly inside, something melancholy that I don't recognize. I knock gently. Jake? Are you awake? The music stops, and a few seconds later he opens the door. He's changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and his hair is messy like he's been running his hands through it. His eyes search my face, and I wonder what he's looking for. How was dinner? He asks. Fine. Good. I lean against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. Leo's a nice guy. Good, Jake says, but he doesn't sound like he means it. That's good. I'm glad you had fun. Are you? The question comes out before I can stop it. Are you really glad, Jake? He looks at me for a long moment, and I can see something breaking apart in his expression. I want you to be happy, Blake. I've told you that. But are you happy? I press. Are you happy with the way things are between us right now? He closes his eyes, and when he opens them again, they're bright with unshed tears. I don't know how to do this, he whispers. I don't know how to be what you need. I never asked you to be anything except honest with me. I am being honest. I'm scared out of my mind, Blake. I'm scared of how I feel about you, scared of what it means, scared of messing up our friendship, scared of not being enough. The words come out in a rush, like he's been holding them back for days. I'm scared of everything. My heart breaks a little at the raw vulnerability in his voice. Jake. I've been trying to do the right thing, he continues. Trying to give you space to find someone who knows what they want, who can give you what you deserve. But watching you get ready for dates, thinking about you with other guys, it's killing me. Then why are you pushing me away? Because I don't want to hurt you. His voice cracks. I don't want to string you along while I figure out who I am. That's not fair to you. I step closer, close enough that I can see the gold flecks in his eyes. What if I want to be strung along? What if I want to figure it out with you? He shakes his head. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. I've never questioned my sexuality before, Blake. Never. I've always been sure about who I was, what I wanted. But with you. He trails off, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. With you, I want things I've never wanted before. I want to touch you, to kiss you, to wake up next to you every morning. And it terrifies me because I don't know what it means about who I am. The confession hangs in the air between us, raw and honest. I can see how much it cost him to say it, how vulnerable he's made himself. It doesn't have to mean anything except that you care about me, I say softly. It doesn't have to change who you are fundamentally. It just means there's more to you than you realized. But what if I can't handle it? What if I get scared and run? What if I hurt you? What if you don't? I counter. What if this is exactly what we're both supposed to be doing? He looks at me with such longing that it takes my breath away. I can't promise I won't mess this up. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance. For a moment, I think he's going to step forward, going to close the distance between us. But then he shakes his head again. I can't ask you to wait for me to figure out my life. That's not fair. You're not asking. I'm offering. Blake. I'm not going to see Leo again, I interrupt. I spent the whole evening thinking about you, wishing I was here with you instead. I can't keep dating other people when you're the only one I want. His face crumples. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it makes this so much harder. Good, I say, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. It should be hard. Loving someone should matter enough to be hard. He stares at me, and I can see the moment the word loving really hits him. His breath catches, and his eyes widen slightly. Is that what this is? He asks quietly. Love. The question is so vulnerable, so uncertain, that it breaks my heart. For me? Yes. It has been for a while. He closes his eyes, and a single tear slides down his cheek. I'm so scared, Blake. I know. I'm scared too. Are you? You seem so sure about everything. I'm sure about how I feel about you. I'm not sure about anything else. I don't know if you'll decide this is too much, or if you'll panic and decide you're not ready, or if you'll meet some girl next week and realize you were just confused. But I'm willing to risk it because what I feel for you is worth the risk. He opens his eyes and looks at me with such intensity that I feel exposed, like he can see straight through to my soul. I don't want you to see Leo again, he says suddenly, his voice rough. I don't want you to see anyone else. I know I don't have the right to ask that when I can't give you what you want. Who says you can't give me what I want? I'm a mess, Blake. I don't even know what I'm doing. Neither do I. That's what makes it an adventure. He laughs, but it sounds more like a sob. You're incredible, you know that? You're willing to put up with all my confusion and fear and insecurity. It's not putting up with it. It's caring about you enough to be patient while you figure things out. I don't deserve you. That's not your choice to make, I say firmly. That's mine. And I choose you, Jake. Confused, scared, uncertain you. I choose you. He stares at me for a long moment, and I can see him warring with himself, fear and hope battling in his expression. Finally, he reaches out and cups my face with his hand, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. I choose you too, he whispers. I don't know what I'm doing, but I choose you. This time when he kisses me, it's different from that first tentative kiss on the couch. This one is desperate, hungry, like he's trying to pour all his confusion and fear and hope into the connection between us. I kiss him back with everything I have, my hands fisting in his t-shirt to pull him closer. When we break apart, we're both breathing hard. Jake rests his forehead against mine, his eyes still closed. I'm going to mess this up, he says. Probably, I agree. I might mess it up too. What do we do then? We figure it out as we go. We talk to each other. We be honest about how we're feeling, even when it's scary. He nods, then pulls back to look at me. I'm feeling terrified and excited and like I might throw up from nerves. I smile. That's a good start. What are you feeling? Like I've been holding my breath for months and I can finally breathe again. He smiles then, the first real smile I've seen from him in days. I like that better than my feeling. Give it time. The terror fades. Does it? I don't know, I admit. But I'm willing to find out if you are. He takes my hand, threading our fingers together. I'm willing to find out. The silence stretched between us for 3 days. 3 days of carefully choreographed avoidance, of listening through my bedroom door to hear when Jake left for work so I could safely emerge for coffee. 3 days of coming home to find the apartment empty, or worse, catching glimpses of him disappearing into his room the moment my key turned in the lock. I'd replayed that night with Leo over and over until the memory felt worn thin at the edges. Jake's face when he demanded to know what other guys could offer that he couldn't. The way his voice had cracked. The raw vulnerability in his eyes before he'd fled to his room, leaving me standing in our kitchen with my world tilted completely off its axis. Leo had texted twice, asking if I wanted to grab dinner again. I'd stared at the messages without responding, unable to explain that I was trapped in some strange limbo where my roommate's jealousy had shattered everything I thought I knew about our friendship. How do you tell someone that you can't date them because your straight best friend is acting like a territorial boyfriend? On Thursday night, I found Jake in our living room at nearly midnight, sitting on the couch with his phone in his hands. The blue light illuminated his face in the darkness, and I could see the exhaustion written in every line of his features. He looked up when I padded barefoot from the kitchen with a glass of water, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Can't sleep either? I asked quietly. He shook his head, glancing back down at his phone. Just thinking. I should have gone to my room. Should have given him space, given us both space to figure out whatever this was. Instead, I found myself settling on the opposite end of the couch, tucking my legs under me. Want to talk about it? Jake's laugh was hollow. I don't even know where to start. The glow from his phone screen caught my attention, and I glimpsed what looked like a text conversation. The name at the top made my stomach clench. Isabella. You're texting Isabella? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Jake's thumb hovered over the screen. Trying to. I've typed about 15 different messages and deleted them all. He ran his free hand through his hair. She wants to meet up this weekend. Says she misses me. Something cold settled in my chest. Do you miss her? Jake stared at the phone, then set it face down on the coffee table. That's the problem. I don't know. I should, right? We dated for 8 months. She's beautiful, funny, smart, everything I should want. The way he said should made my heart ache. But I keep thinking about you instead. The words hung in the air between us, quiet and devastating. Jake wasn't looking at me, his gaze fixed on some point past my shoulder. Jake. I know how that sounds, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Trust me, I know. I've been trying to figure out what's wrong with me for weeks. Months, maybe. Isabella would be talking about something, and I'd find myself wondering what you'd think about it. Or she'd laugh at something I said, and I'd wish it was your laugh instead. My chest felt tight. There's nothing wrong with you. isn't there? He finally met my eyes, and I saw the fear there. I'm supposed to be thinking about getting back together with my ex-girlfriend, and instead I'm sitting here at midnight trying not to think about how much I hated watching you with Leo. How much I wanted to. Wanted to what? Jake's hands clenched into fists on his thighs. Wanted to grab you and tell him to leave. Tell him that you're mine. The possession in his voice sent shivers down my spine. I'm not yours, Jake. We're friends. Are we? The question was raw, desperate. Because friends don't feel like this. Friends don't lie awake at night thinking about their roommate's mouth. Friends don't get jealous when their roommate goes on dates. My breath caught. You think about my mouth? A flush crept up Jake's neck. God, Blake. I think about everything. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. How you smell like that cologne I bought you for Christmas. The way you look at me sometimes, like. He shook his head. Like maybe you're thinking about me too. I am. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. I have been. For months. Jake's eyes widened. What? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was it. The moment I'd been both longing for and dreading. I've been thinking about you, Jake. Not just as a friend. I've been trying so hard to move on, to date other people, because I knew you were straight and I didn't want to ruin what we have. You've been trying to move on, Jake repeated slowly. From me. Yes. So when you went out with Hunter, with Leo? I was trying to get over you. My voice cracked. I was trying to find someone who could make me feel even half of what I feel when you're around. Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing. And did they? Make you feel that way? No. I swallowed hard. Nobody does. Nobody makes me laugh like you do, or makes me feel as safe as I do when you're here. Nobody else feels like home. Blake. My name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I'm scared. Of what? Of this. Of us. Of the fact that I've never felt this way about a guy before, and I don't know what it means. His voice was shaking. I don't know how to be what you need. I shifted closer on the couch, close enough that our knees were almost touching. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. But what if myself isn't enough? What if I'm not actually? What if this is just some weird phase because I'm jealous of losing my best friend? Is that what you think this is? Jake looked down at his hands. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. I mean, I've been with women my whole life. I've never even looked at a guy before you. That doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. But how do I know? How do I know if I actually want you, or if I just want things to go back to the way they were? The question hung between us, heavy with uncertainty. I could see the genuine confusion in Jake's eyes, the fear that he was misleading both of us. Part of me wanted to push, to convince him that what we had was real and worth exploring. But I also knew that he needed to come to that conclusion himself. Maybe, I said carefully, you don't have to know everything right now. Maybe you just have to decide what you want to do next. What do you mean? I mean, you can spend the night texting Isabella and trying to convince yourself that going back to her is the safe choice. Or you can acknowledge that something has changed between us, and we can figure out what that means together. Jake's gaze dropped to my lips, and I saw the exact moment his resolve wavered. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? Blake, I'm serious. I've never done this before. I don't know how to be with a guy. I don't know if I'm actually gay or bi or just confused about my feelings for you specifically. And I've never been with someone who's questioning their sexuality, I admit it. But I know how I feel about you. I know that I'd rather take the risk of getting hurt than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Jake reached for his phone, and for a moment, I thought he was going to call Isabella. Instead, he pulled up the unsent text messages he'd been composing. Look at this, he said, showing me the screen. 15 different attempts to tell her I want to see her again. And I couldn't send any of them. I read the messages, variations of, I miss you too, and let's grab dinner this weekend, and I've been thinking about us. All perfectly reasonable responses to an ex-girlfriend reaching out. Why couldn't you send them? Because every time I tried, I kept thinking about you finding out. About how you'd look if you knew I was dating Isabella again. He deleted the messages as he spoke. I kept imagining you moving out, or pulling away from me completely, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. Jake. I think I've been using her as a shield, he continued. Using all of them as shields. As long as I was dating women, I didn't have to examine what I was really feeling. But the thought of losing you, of things changing between us, it's terrifying. Things have already changed, I said gently. We can't go back to pretending this doesn't exist. I know. Jake set his phone aside and turned to face me fully. I know, and that scares me more than anything. Because what if I'm not brave enough for this? What if I try and then panic and hurt you worse than if we just stayed friends? What if you're brave enough? What if this is exactly what both of us need? Jake's eyes searched my face. How are you so sure? Because I've been watching you for months, Jake. I've seen how you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. I've felt how you touch me, your hand on my shoulder, sitting close when we watch movies, the way you hug me like you don't want to let go. That's not just friendship. I do touch you differently, he admitted quietly. I never noticed until you started dating other people. Suddenly, I was hyper-aware of every time our hands brushed, every time you'd lean against me. I started making excuses to be close to you. I noticed. Of course you did. Jake's smile was rueful. God, I must have been so obvious. Following you around like a jealous boyfriend. You were a little obvious, I agreed, unable to suppress a small smile. But I thought I was projecting. I thought I was seeing what I wanted to see. No, you were seeing exactly what was there. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. Jake reached out hesitantly, his fingertips barely grazing my hand. I've been lying to myself for months, telling myself that I was just being protective, that I just didn't want to lose my best friend. And now I can't stop thinking about kissing you. The admission came out in a rush, like he'd been holding it back for weeks. I think about it constantly. What you'd taste like, how you'd sound, whether you'd kiss me back or push me away. My heart was racing. You wouldn't be the first person to wonder about that. I wouldn't. Jake, I've been in love with you for months. Of course I've thought about kissing you. In love with me, he repeated, like he was testing the words. You're in love with me. Yes. And I've been too scared to admit that I might be in love with you too. The words hit me like a physical blow. Might be. Am, Jake corrected quickly. I am. I'm in love with you, Blake. I don't know when it happened or how, but I am. And it's terrifying and confusing, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I can't keep pretending otherwise. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Jake. I don't want to text Isabella back. I don't want to see her this weekend or any weekend. I want to stay here with you and figure out what this means. What do you want it to mean? Jake moved closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I want it to mean that I get to touch you, that I get to hold your hand and kiss you and tell other people that you're mine. I want it to mean that I don't have to be afraid of how I feel anymore. You can have all of that, I whispered. If you want it. I do want it. I want you. Jake's hand found mine, fingers intertwining. But I need you to be patient with me. I need you to understand that I'm going to be figuring this out as I go. I can be patient. Even if I panic sometimes. Even if I need to go slow. Even then. I squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out together. Jake nodded, and I could see some of the tension leave his shoulders. Together. So what happens now? I asked. Now. Jake lifted our joined hands, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. Now I stop running from this. From us. The simple gesture sent warmth spreading through my chest. I'd like that. Me too. Jake's smile was soft, vulnerable. I can't promise I'll be good at this right away. I can't promise I won't freak out sometimes. I'm not expecting you to be perfect, Jake. I'm just expecting you to be honest with me. I can do honest. He shifted closer until our thighs were touching. Honestly, I'm terrified and excited, and I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff. How about we jump together? Jake's eyes crinkled at the corners. I love that you're willing to jump with me. I love that you're finally ready to jump. I love. Jake started, then stopped, his cheeks flushing. I love you. Hearing the words, seeing the certainty in his eyes as he said them, felt like coming home. I love you too. Jake reached up with his free hand, fingers tracing along my jaw. Can I kiss you now? I've been wanting to for so long. Yes, I breathed. Please. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, as if I'd ever want to. When his lips finally touched mine, soft and tentative, I felt like every nerve ending in my body came alive at once. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, Jake learning the shape of my mouth against his. When I kissed him back, he made a small sound of surprise and pleasure that sent heat shooting through me. God, he murmured against my lips. Why did I wait so long to do this? Because you were scared. I said simply. But you're not anymore. No. Jake agreed, resting his forehead against mine. I'm not scared anymore. The silence stretched between us after our kiss, but it wasn't the heavy, uncomfortable silence we'd been drowning in for days. This was different, charged with possibility, trembling with the weight of what we'd just admitted to each other. Jake's hand was still cupped against my face, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my cheek as we sat there on the couch, foreheads nearly touching, both of us breathing like we'd just run a marathon. Blake, he whispered, and my name sounded different in his voice now, softer, more reverent, like he was tasting it for the first time. I need to tell you something, and I need you to just let me get it all out, okay? Because if I stop, I might lose my nerve again. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His eyes were so close to mine, I could see the flecks of gold in the brown, could count his eyelashes if I wanted to. He was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, and now, impossibly, he was looking at me like I was beautiful too. I've been lying to myself for months, he started, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe longer. I kept telling myself that what I felt for you was just friendship, that the way I wanted to be around you all the time was normal, that the way I got jealous when you talked to other guys was just me being protective. He laughed, but it came out shaky. God, I was so stupid. Jake, you weren't. No, let me finish. Please. His other hand found mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. That first time you mentioned Hunter, when you said you were going on a coffee date, I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I couldn't understand why the thought of you with someone else made me feel sick, made me want to punch something, made me want to. He paused, swallowing hard. Made me want to kiss you until you forgot anyone else existed. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was terrified. The words came out in a rush. I've never felt this way about a guy before, Blake. I've never questioned my sexuality, never wondered if maybe I was missing something. But with you, God, with you it was like everything I thought I knew about myself just crumbled. He pulled back slightly, enough to look directly into my eyes. Do you know what I was thinking about when I was with Isabella? When I was kissing her, when I was holding her, when I was supposed to be present and focused on her? His voice cracked. I was thinking about you, about what it would feel like to touch you instead, about whether your skin would be as soft as it looked, whether you'd make those little sounds when I kissed your neck, whether you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now. I felt heat flood my cheeks. Jake. I used her, Blake. I used Isabella, and probably half the other girls I've dated as shields, as ways to convince myself I was normal, that these feelings for you were just some weird phase I was going through. He looked down at our joined hands, shame coloring his voice. That's why I kept dating. Why I kept trying to find someone who could make me stop thinking about you. But no one ever could. Is that why you were texting her tonight? He nodded miserably. I was trying to convince myself that if I could just get her back, if I could just force myself to want her the way I'm supposed to, then maybe these feelings for you would go away. But I couldn't even send the messages because they felt like lies. Because the only person I want is you. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest tight. What changed? What made you stop running? You did. He looked back up at me, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. When you said you'd been dating other people to get over me, when you admitted you had feelings for me too, I realized I had a choice. I could keep being a coward, keep using other people as shields, keep pretending that this thing between us wasn't real. Or I could be brave enough to admit that I'm in love with my best friend, even if it means questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. My breath caught. You're in love with me? Desperately, he whispered. Completely. It terrifies me how much I love you, Blake. The way you get that little crease between your eyebrows when you're concentrating on your designs. The way you hum under your breath when you're cooking. The way you listen to people like what they're saying is the most important thing in the world. The way you've been patient with me even when I was being an absolute ass. He lifted our joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. I love how you see the world, how you find beauty in things other people overlook. I love that you're kind without being naive, that you're strong without being hard. I love that you make me want to be a better person, that you make me want to be worthy of the way you look at me. Tears were sliding down my cheeks now, and I didn't care. I've loved you for so long, Jake. I was so scared you'd figure it out, and things would get weird between us. Things are weird between us, he said with a shaky laugh. But it's a good weird, right? Like, terrifying but good. The best kind of weird. I agreed, leaning forward to rest my forehead against his. But Jake, I need you to know that I don't expect you to have all the answers right now. I don't need you to slap a label on yourself or figure out your whole identity overnight. This is new for you, and I don't want you to feel pressured to. Blake. He cut me off gently, his thumb stroking over my cheek again. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need you to understand something. This isn't about labels or sexuality or what other people might think. This is about you. This is about the fact that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, and I don't care if that makes me gay or bi or whatever. I just care that it makes me yours. The words hit me like a physical force, stealing my breath. Mine, if you'll have me, he said, vulnerability written across every line of his face. I know I've been an idiot. I know I've probably hurt you with all my back and forth, all my dating other people, all the times I made you feel like you had to hide who you are. But if you're willing to give me a chance, I promise I'll spend every day proving that you're the only person I want. I kissed him then, pouring months of longing and hope and love into the press of our lips. He made a soft sound against my mouth, his hands tangling in my hair, and I felt something settle deep in my chest, a sense of rightness, of coming home. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, I smiled at him. I've been yours for months, Jake. I was just waiting for you to realize you wanted to be mine too. I do, he said fiercely. God, Blake, I want to be yours so badly it makes my chest hurt. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep holding you. I want to be the person you come to when you've had a bad day or when you've got good news to share. I want to learn how to love you the way you deserve to be loved. You're already doing it, I whispered, tracing the line of his jaw with my fingertips. Just by being honest, by being here, by choosing this even when it's scary. He caught my hand, pressing another kiss to my palm. It is scary, he admitted. I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to hurt you without meaning to, that I'm not going to be enough for you. Jake, look at me. I waited until his eyes met mine. I'm scared too. I've been in love with you for so long that this feels almost too good to be true. But we're going to figure it out together, okay? We're going to make mistakes and have conversations and probably stumble around a bit, but we're going to do it together. He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Together. Together, I confirmed. And Jake, you're already enough. You've always been enough. He pulled me closer then, until I was practically in his lap, my head tucked under his chin. I love you, he murmured into my hair. I love you so much it feels like my heart might explode. I love you too. I whispered back, letting myself sink into his warmth, into the solid reality of his arms around me. We're really doing this, aren't we? We're really doing this, he confirmed, and I could hear the smile in his voice. No more dating other people to make ourselves feel better. No more pretending we don't want what we want. No more running. No more running, I agreed, tilting my head up to look at him. Just us. Just us, he repeated, and then he was kissing me again, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. So what happens now? Now we figure out how to be together, I said simply. We take it one day at a time, one conversation at a time. We're honest with each other, even when it's hard. We learn how to do this. I like the sound of that, he said, his arms tightening around me. Blake. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For being patient with me. For seeing something in me worth waiting for. For being brave enough to tell me how you felt. He paused, his voice getting softer. For loving me even when I was too scared to love you back. I felt tears prick my eyes again. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Jake. It's not something I could have stopped even if I'd wanted to. Still, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Thank you. We sat there for a long time after that, just holding each other, both of us probably still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The apartment felt different now, not like a place where we were just roommates, but like home, like the beginning of something beautiful and real and entirely ours. 6 weeks later, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jake humming in the kitchen. The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains. Our bedroom. Because after that night of confessions, neither of us wanted to sleep apart anymore. I found him at the counter, hair still messy from sleep, wearing nothing but boxer shorts and one of my old college t-shirts that had somehow become his favorite. "Good morning, beautiful," he said without turning around, and I still felt that flutter in my chest every time he called me that. Jake had always been affectionate with his girlfriends, but with me, it was different, deeper, like he was savoring every endearment, every casual touch, every moment of intimacy we'd built together. "How do you know it was me?" I asked, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. "Because you walk like you're trying not to wake the neighbors, even though Mrs. Patterson is probably already doing her morning yoga routine." He leaned back against my chest, and I pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "Plus, you're the only person who lives here." I laughed, remembering how just 2 months ago, I would have analyzed every casual touch, every joke that might have contained a hidden meaning. Now Jake's honesty was as natural as breathing. He'd told me last week that he'd been practicing saying "my boyfriend" in the mirror, not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted to get comfortable with how good it felt to say it out loud. "Isabella texted me yesterday," he said, and I felt my body tense slightly. Jake noticed immediately, turning in my arms to face me. "Hey, it's okay. I told her I'm seeing someone now, someone I'm serious about. She said she's happy for me." "Did you tell her it's me?" "No, but I think she suspected. She said she always wondered why I talked about you so much." Jake's smile was soft, self-deprecating. Apparently, I wasn't as subtle as I thought I was. We'd been having conversations like this regularly. Check-ins about how we were both feeling, what we needed, what scared us. Jake had suggested it after reading some articles about healthy relationships, and I'd been amazed by how seriously he was taking this transition. He approached loving me with the same intensity he brought to everything else, but tempered with a gentleness I'd never seen him show anyone. "Marcus wants to meet you," I said, mentioning my college friend who was visiting next weekend. "As my boyfriend, officially." "I'd like that." Jake poured coffee into 2 mugs, adding cream to mine without asking because he'd memorized how I liked it. "I've been thinking about calling my parents too. Not to come out over the phone, but to tell them I'm bringing someone home for Christmas." This was huge. Jake had been slowly telling his closest friends about us, starting with his coworker Dave, who'd apparently just shrugged and said he'd figured Jake would end up with someone awesome eventually. But his parents were different. They'd always expected him to bring home a girlfriend, then a wife, then grandchildren. The traditional path. "Are you ready for that?" I asked carefully. "I'm ready to stop hiding you," Jake said firmly. "I spent too many years hiding from myself. I don't want to hide from them too." We settled on the couch with our coffee, Jake's legs tangled with mine in the way that had become our normal. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text from his sister. "When do I get to meet this mysterious person who's got you acting like a lovesick teenager?" "Lovesick teenager?" I raised an eyebrow. "She's not wrong," Jake admitted, blushing slightly. "I may have mentioned you a few times in our last conversation." "A few times? Okay, fine. She said I brought you up every 5 minutes." "Happy." He was grinning now, and I loved seeing him like this, relaxed, happy, openly infatuated. "I can't help it. You're interesting." "Just interesting?" "Interesting, beautiful, talented, patient enough to put up with my emotional crisis, amazing in bed." He counted on his fingers, and I laughed. "You're not so bad yourself." Jake's expression grew more serious. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to say something that night. If you'd just let me keep spiraling. You would have figured it out eventually," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Maybe, but I might have lost you in the process." He set down his coffee and shifted to face me fully. "I know I put you through a lot these past few months. The jealousy, the mixed signals, the way I kept running from what I was feeling." "Jake." "No, let me finish. I need you to know that I understand how hard it must have been to love someone who kept pushing you away. And I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. This isn't some experiment or phase. You're it for me." The certainty in his voice still surprised me sometimes. Jake had always been decisive, But this was different. This was the kind of certainty that came from finally understanding yourself completely. "You're it for me too," I said softly. "You always have been. Even when I was being an idiot about it. Especially then." Jake leaned forward and kissed me, soft and slow, like we had all the time in the world. And maybe we did. We'd spent so many months dancing around each other, fighting our feelings, that now every kiss felt like a gift. Every morning together felt like something we'd earned. When we broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered, and I knew he still marveled at being able to say it out loud. "I love you too." Outside, the city was waking up, but inside our apartment, we were exactly where we belonged. Together, finally, without fear or pretense or the weight of unspoken feelings. Jake's journey to loving me hadn't been simple or straightforward, but it had been real, and that made everything we'd built together feel solid, unshakable. "So," Jake said, settling back into my arms, "what do you want to do today?" "This," I said simply. "Just this." And for the first time in months, that was enough. It was everything.